Hey everyone, we are back with another episode from the Woods Collab, and this is the Woods Collab podcast. I'm with
Nakesha Woods.
And I'm Michael Woods, and we are the Woods Collab. Today we are here to talk about relationships. We figured this episode would be a good time to talk about relationships because Nakesha and I have an anniversary coming up, our wedding anniversary, our 18. We're celebrating 18 years, right?
Yes.
18 years.
Of marriage and almost 20 years together.
That's right. That's right. It's a long time.
Okay.
So,
all right, settle down.
So we figured that this will be a good opportunity. We talk a lot about professional development, personal development. So with that and celebrating 18 years of marriage, we figured let's talk a little bit about relationships and how we could leverage some skills pertaining to relationships in the professional and personal space. Keisha?
Yeah, I think it's important because no matter what you do, you're going to interact with someone, right? And it's very important to really understand, like, what are some of those key themes that you need to be intentional about when you're showing up in a different relationship. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. And so we've identified a number of things that we're going to talk to you all, but the foundation of it that we have found to be consistent across wherever you are, work, home, family, friends, is commitment. So commitment is that first core ingredient to relationships and how we see it. Mm-hmm. And so you have to make the decision whether or not you want to be bothered or not, right?
That's true.
So am I really committed to this human being? Am I committed to this relationship? And I think that in the workplace, it's yes, do I want to be here? Do I want to be on this team? Do I want to be in this position? And if the answer is yes, then you have to make it up in your mind that you are committed to the relationship that's associated with that role, that position, that company, or even that marriage, right?
That's true. That is very true. So with us, we're talking about an 18, 20-year commitment. And commitment, when you're talking personally, we're talking professionally, there's different time frames as well. So there's long-term commitment because you could be in a position, and that's not the position that you have set for yourself in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. Mm-hmm. So it's okay to not have that long-term commitment, but you should be analyzing and assessing, are you committed in that moment? You say, okay, this is my task at hand. This is my job for today or for this season or for this quarter. Commit to it in that moment. And we could extend it to, 18, 20 years, or it could be committing to a day. You say, okay, for today, here's my commitment. And then you might say, okay, next time for this week, here's my commitment for the week. Here's my commitment for the month. But ultimately, the more you commit to it, the more it's going to work in your favor.
Okay. I'm committed to that answer.
Okay. So commitment is one thing. So take note of that commitment. We should be really looking to see, are we committed to what we're currently involved in? And the second thing we're going to talk about is trust. So tell us a bit about trust. We were talking about the predictive vulnerability and that sort of thing. Give us a little more insight on that.
Yeah, so once you commit and you decide that, yes, I want to be bothered with this career position today, or yes, I am committed to this human being, or even a relative, right? I am committed to being your mom, your sister, your brother, whoever, right? You got to trust. And you got to really make sure that you're working on that trust. And understanding what trust looks like for you may look a little different for that person, because we all approach trust a little differently. Like some people are like, the first day I meet you, I trust you until you give me a reason not to. Right. And then other people, I tend to withhold trust a little bit longer than you, I think, where I'm like, ooh, I don't really know you like that. So we're going to see how this works out. But I feel like you are very open that, yes, this person, this is a good person until they prove me otherwise. Would you agree with that?
For the most part.
Okay.
For the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we approach trust differently, but research has found that a lot of times you can look at trust in a couple of different ways. So you can have predictability trust, which is that trust that says, you know what, I've been around you for an amount of time, and these are the expectations that I have for you, and you hit them. So you meet them. So you do the things that I expect you to do. I can predict your behavior because this is how you typically show up. This is how you typically respond. This is how you typically treat me. And so because of that, I can predict your behavior. So that means I trust you. And when you don't do what I predict that you will do, then I trust you less. So if you have a leader or even a significant other and they break their word or they don't do the thing that they say they're going to do, that can be something that's going to break trust for you because you can't predict next time how they're going to respond to a particular thing. So predictability trust is one. Another way to look at trust is vulnerability-based trust. So vulnerability-based trust is saying that I trust you enough to be vulnerable around you. I can make mistakes. I can now wear my makeup in the morning and I might have a hair scarf on and I can be that vulnerable with you and trust that that's okay, right? I can make mistakes. I can ask you for help. And so, when we first met, I was like an independent woman, right? I was like, I'm not going to ask you for help. And so we laughed because I ran out of gas and we were dating at the time. And I didn't even call you to help put gas in the car. I just figured it out on my own. You're like, why didn't you call me? And I'm like, because I don't know you well enough yet. I can't trust that that's okay. So the next part of that is the vulnerability trust. So what are your thoughts on predictive versus vulnerability trust?
Yeah, so the predictive one, I'm a person. I have certain patterns, of course, but at the same time, I like to switch things up as well. The one I lean towards is the one about the vulnerability piece, because especially when you're at a spot where you're able to be yourself, there's a lot of that puts a lot of things at ease when we can be yourself. Because sometimes, especially in a work setting, or like you said, if you're meeting someone that has some type of some impact on what you're doing. That vulnerability piece, it goes a long way because you're at a point, it just helps to say, okay, you know what, here, I'm going to be myself regardless, but here there's that much more, comfort, or it helps to build trust when you see that person that you're interacting with is a bit more accepting as to who you are. I know in a workplace that could be, if you don't have a certain level of confidence, that could be a turnoff for some, where it requires so much attention for you to be yourself because how others are reacting to it. So when you're in a spot where you can actually be yourself, or you work through a relationship where you can be vulnerable and be who you are or be how you are, it goes a long way. So I personally, when I'm, in settings where it's like, you know what, this is a spot where you don't even notice that people are open to you, because there's some spots you'll go in where you say, wow, this person is not used to this. So then you become aware of those things. But when you're in a spot where this person is, accepting as to who you are, accepting of people, accepting of their differences, it just works out much better.
Yeah. And then you can be yourself, and then you trust, you have to be able to trust someone in order to really be yourself, or trust the situation, or trust the setting. So I agree with that.
Yeah. So because even, I'm sure, and I've been there before, like, years ago, you're in a pocket, it's like, maybe not comfortable in being myself in this situation because I am seeing the expectation of others and what they're used to. Maybe some traditional setting.
Okay. So
I can imagine some out there are experiencing that, where they feel they can't be themselves because this is not as traditional. So how do you work through that? I have some thoughts, but what are your thoughts on like how you can work through that, where people may not be used to dealing with a you because it's so different.
Yeah. So I think what's helped me out is, first of all, going back to commitment, because if I'm committed, then I'm going to try to figure out how to show up in this setting and be vulnerable enough and trust the people around me. But I think that communicating your intent so people don't assume it has been helpful for me, so that I can say, okay, well, I ask a lot of questions because I'm curious, right? And I want to learn how things work. And so instead of going right at just asking a bunch of questions, or right at certain things, I think that helps to paint a picture of who you are so that people don't fill in those gaps and tell a story in their mind of those things. So I just like to be transparent and lead with who I am before I start to make decisions and act in certain ways so that assumption isn't made. And I think that helps me to be myself more, because now I feel like I'm controlling the narrative more because I'm putting out there what I'm putting out there. Like, just because I do a particular thing, don't make an assumption about me, but actually get to know me. And this is how I'm going to help you to get to know me. So that's how I think about it. I don't know. What are your ideas?
No, that's good. I think another thing is to, like, I think you were right there when you said that commitment plays a long way. Also, we talked about this on a couple of podcasts ago. As far as if it matters to you, then be bold about it. I don't think in a spot we have to be aware of certain things, of course, but at the same time, being yourself, knowing that if you're at a table, if you're on a team, or if you're involved in this relationship, you have a say and you have the right to be who you are. And I think over the last few years, not just the last few years, over a long period of time, especially in a work setting, things are different now. Like things like, you remember years ago, if you saw somebody that had a tattoo, that would be, a bit of a taboo years ago in some settings. Now, it's not as much. Or in a professional setting, some people may have certain hairstyles that are more accepting now, or people may carry themselves a different way because there's been more conversation about opening eyes up to differences, that sort of thing. Yeah, diversity. People have start to not. We have a long ways to go, but certain things are not as taboo as they were in the past, or at least people are not saying it as much.
Yeah.
So it's very important to. So if someone is in a setting where it's like, you know what, I don't feel like I can be myself, that's something I think it needs to be talked about. It needs to be addressed, and someone needs to do something about it.
I agree.
But like you said, it goes back to that trust. It goes back to the vulnerability, having those conversations with those people that you're working with. Say, hey, I see that you have a difference of opinion pertaining to this thing over here. Let's talk about it. Let me share with you my perspective. Let me share with you what my insight is toward the matter.
Yeah, and I've even learned how to communicate what I need in a relationship to trust, right? So I know that keeping commitments is huge to me. Or if you make a mistake, just apologize, right? I think that those are some things that really stand out to me, and I really think that it can be helpful if you can get familiar with, dang, this relationship with South, why? What was that thing that broke it for me? What broke the trust? And then communicating moving forward. Okay, so I know that for me, trust really depends on your ability to apologize quickly or assume positive intent or whatever that is, and then communicating it to whoever you're committed to in that relationship.
That's true. And also comes with, we were talking about accepting disappointments. So if things are, it's like over the last 18, 20 years, those things that you did that were disappointing. But I say that to say, even though the times where sometimes we may have expectations or things, it just didn't go right, right? And how that's in relationships, that's professional, that's personal. How do you work through those things? How do you work through those moments of disappointment? How do you work through those moments where a deadline wasn't met, or a project did not go well, or commitment, it just got broken? How do you work through those things? So we talked about, forgiveness, apologizing, accepting mistakes, and things of that nature. What does that do to help a relationship, to help strengthen a relationship, going through those moments? Because any relationship, it's not all happy, feel-good moments.
Listen, these 18 years, baby, you can't see the grades, but they
Ooh, look, now you see mine, you can see mine that much more. They turn white now.
I think that the commitment has always been the thing in our marriage that's been helpful, because it's like, okay, so this didn't go well, let's communicate, which is the next core ingredient, is communication. So I don't know if you did that on purpose, but let's communicate how we're feeling so that we can move past it and so that we can get better, right? And so I have to be honest and truthful with communicating that this made me feel a certain way, and this is why. And then you have to be receptive to my perspective, even if you disagree. But I think that adapting and accepting is super important. So I'm going to accept that this has happened, and then we'll figure out how to adapt based on the situation so that moving forward, you understand what my needs are and I understand what your needs are. And it's about meeting in the middle. Now, if I don't communicate and you don't communicate in that relationship, then you can continue to offend that person or be offended by that person. And then that just builds resentment, and then you're not able to move past it. And then you find that you're no longer committed to the situation, all because you didn't communicate. And I will also add, it's important to fight fair. Say that again. It's important to fight fair, especially in my experience in a marriage, is I'm not going to hit below the belt, and I'm not going to say things that are going to, because you've been vulnerable with me, because you've been vulnerable with me and that trust is there, I know the things that I shouldn't say, right? And so I may have a certain feeling, so I have to make sure that I'm intentional with how I communicate so that I am fighting fair. And I think the same thing goes along the lines when you're in a workplace. If you are calling somebody out in front of everybody else and you're saying things out of anger without thinking them through, then you're not fighting fair in that setting either.
Right. And knowing the consequences of not fighting fair. Because when you don't fight fair, if you say something or do something that was where you cross that line, that's gonna sting that person, and you're adding fuel to any fire, and also you're giving that person a little bit of fuel to not fight fair themselves.
It's a retaliation. You say something, I'm gonna show you I got a vocabulary as well.
Yeah,
right?
and it can be worked through if that happens, because we've all done it. You've done it. I've done it. It can be worked through, but it's gonna just prolong getting to that point where there's that partnership and working together. But no, fight fair, but at the same time, if you don't know the consequences if you don't fight fair. No, I was gonna say, so another thing we're gonna talk about is feedback. So that's like how significant feedback is in a relationship.
Yeah, and I think it goes in along the lines that we talked about, like if I'm offended or if I feel a certain way, or if I find that I'm not assuming positive intent, right? Because I think that that's an important thing when we think about respecting the person and that respect showing up. If I do not show positive intent or do not believe that you have positive intentions, it's my job to ask you, what did you mean by, right? So this happened, just curious, what did you mean by? Help me understand. Because if I'm making assumptions around it, I might assume that you're mad at me, you're holding a grudge. Like, your mind can really go wild in that situation. And the same thing at work, right? If I'm passed over for a promotion, if I'm not given an opportunity to volunteer on a project, if my leader doesn't say good morning on a particular day, if I don't assume positive intent, then I'm going to go into this negative spiral. And so just taking that pause and saying, hey, I have a question for you. You came in this morning and you didn't say hi. What happened? Because usually you typically say hi. Now I'm providing that feedback, but I'm seeking to understand and asking that question so that I can make sure that what I'm experiencing is really what I'm experiencing, and not just that, they're trying to figure out if they left the iron on at home and they're just having a moment. Yeah,
because we also could make some stories up. We could create a whole narrative in our brain, and I do it. I'll do it. And you have to say, nope, that's not what it is. And sometimes when you start getting, there's things where, personally, I won't think about. Like, it's nothing. But then there's moments where you start to create that story. And you're like, wait a second, why am I even thinking about that? Let me just go about and do my business.
Yeah, and that's a harder place to bounce back from, because we haven't provided the feedback, we haven't had the conversation, and then we look up and we can't stand the person, and they're just going about their merry way, and maybe they had positive intentions, but their impact is showing that it's at a detriment to the relationship. And so you got to speak up and you got to have that conversation and figure out what that conversation looks like. And keep in mind, if we're building on what we talked about, you're already committed to the person, you already trust the person, or you're building that trust with that person. So communication is just that next step that's going to make sure that you can solidify that relationship even much more.
Communication is the key.
Okay. All right, so this is just a typically iceberg when it comes to relationships. Like I said, Mike and I have been working in our careers for about 20 years or so. And we've been together 40 years together. And we have relatives, friends, family, just like everyone else. But we also have been married going on 18 years now. We're super proud of that. And so if you want us to continue a conversation around relationships, we can dig in even further. So please put a comment about what you would like to hear from the Woods Collab if you want to hear more on relationships. But what we've identified so far today is really having that commitment, understanding what commitment looks like, making sure that you understand what trust looks like and what do you need. Do you trust openly from the very beginning, or does trust take a little bit of time for you? And then communication. Communication is so important. How you communicate, when you communicate, and what you communicate, so that you're providing feedback and staying on the same page. So we are the Woods Collab. Again, this is
Mike Woods.
And I'm Nakesha Woods. Thank you so much.